The very last thing that we want to do is be able to sketch a graph given some general characteristics about the graph. Those characteristics are going to have to do with the spots where the graph is increasing or decreasing, and then also where the graph is greater than 0 or less than 0. Greater or less than 0 meaning, are we above the x-axis or below it? So these are two types of parameters that we can use to draw a general sketch. It's not going to be accurate because we don't know exactly where all the twists and turns are, but we can get a general idea of what a function that meets these criteria might be. So I'm going to divide this into two parts. We'll talk about increasing and decreasing intervals, and then we'll talk about above or below the x-axis. So in order to do this, the best thing to do is to always start with your interval that's at negative infinity. So always start it on the left and go towards the right. So our increasing interval, it says, so increasing means that the graph is going higher between the interval of negative infinity and 0. So again, this is where we're going to start at negative infinity, all the way over on the left. And it says that our graph is going to be increasing from negative infinity all the way until we get to 0. So what we're going to do just to get started is we're going to do a dashed line basically at all of these places that we have some sort of a change. So if we say that we're going to do a dashed line here, and that's going to indicate a change for our increasing or decreasing interval. Remember that these intervals, we talked about these when we did parabolas, these are x values. Okay, so negative infinity to 0 in the x direction. So I'm starting over here, way off of my graph, and headed towards an x value of 0. And I know that something important is happening here. We are increasing until we get to that point. So I'm going to draw a vertical line there to indicate that that's a critical point. Okay. We also know that from 4 to infinity, we are increasing as well. So at 4, positive 4 as an x value, I'm also going to draw a dashed line. This is just kind of breaking the polynomial that we're going to graph up into some regions, basically. Okay, so that's our change in increasing to decreasing. Notice also that it says we're decreasing from 0 to 4. Well, that makes sense. In between the intervals that we're increasing, we should be decreasing. So now we want to look at where we're above or below the graph or the x-axis, because that's going to define a positive or greater than 0. So if we are greater than 0, we are above the x-axis. If we are less than 0, we are below it. So let's go ahead and plot some critical points for that as well. So again, we're going to do a dot. It says that from negative 2 to 3, we are going to be above the x-axis. We're greater than 0. So from negative 2 to 3. Remember, this is not an ordered pair. This is an interval in the x direction. So I'm just plotting some points here. It also says that from 5 to infinity, we are above the axis. So I'm going to put another dot at 5 because I know that from that point and then all the way to an x value of infinity, my graph is going to be above the x-axis. All right, so from negative infinity to negative 2, we are below the x-axis. So again, this negative 2 is that critical point. We'll be down here somewhere to the left of it and up here somewhere to the right of it. And then finally, between 3 and 5, we are also down low. So we're down here somewhere between 3 and 5. So let's again just indicate that a dot is going to indicate a change. For f of x either being greater than 0 and where it's less than 0. Okay, so based on that, we can draw a rough sketch. Remember, we are decreasing just on the interval between 0 and 4, and then we are increasing, let's start there, with negative infinity to 0. So from negative infinity all the way to 0, we know that we are increasing, and we also know that we are below the x-axis right up until we get to negative 2. So we want to hit that point as we go along. So we're going to start at negative infinity, thinking about way over here, but we are increasing. So if we're increasing, that means we are coming up from negative infinity in the y direction. And then we'll come up this way. We're increasing, 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 increasing until we get to a x value of 0. I honestly don't know what the y value is supposed to be there. I made it at about 5. Maybe you'll draw it and make it at about 8. It doesn't really matter. We're not trying to draw an exact sketch right now because we don't have an actual equation. If we had an equation, we could plug in exact points. All right, we're told that we are decreasing all the way now until we get to 4, right? We are decreasing from 0 to 4, but we also know that we cross the x-axis again because we are below the x-axis between 3 and 5. So we know that we come down here and cross at 3, and then at 4, we have another point where we're going to turn around and start going back up. And then finally, we need to hit that point at 5, and we know that we are continuing to go up from there. So that's a rough sketch that would be a graph that has the characteristics that were described.